Good evening to all the participants. I am Hitendra Padalia. I am heading Forestry and Ecology Department at IIRS Dehradun. I will be today talking about the application of geospatial technology in forestry and ecology domain. In my presentation, basically, I will first give a brief introduction about the advantage of RSGIS and GNSS in general in the field of forestry, and then there are variety of applications which are possible using geospatial technology. I will talk about them. As far as geospatial technology and geoinformation technology is concerned, so most of you may be aware about these technologies. Uh, the advantage of remote sensing here is that it provides you synoptic coverage, it provides you periodic observation as well as multi-scale observations. And some of the observations which are even not possible with human eyes can be taken from the space-borne camera or any other remote sensing based sensors. And more recent time, it has become very cost effective also for monitoring natural resources like forestry. And then second technology is the GPS technology. You are aware you are using it, and in the field of forestry also there are several new applications are emerging in the same time. Use of GPS in conjunction with different ICT tools and for navigation, for communication, etc. And then GIS, which is a very important platform because it is used to integrate the information. And in the case of forest ecosystem, it is having different themes. So GIS is very useful in integrating different layers of different themes, and then helping us in decision making. As far as the remote sensing is concerned, electromagnetic radiation is the primary source of information, both for doing active and passive remote sensing. And there are steps involved in acquisition of, from the acquisition of satellite data to the processing of satellite data to generation of thematic outputs, etc. But the important part is that with respect to the wavelengths, there are selected windows in which the remote sensing can be done, and such windows are called atmospheric windows. And you can see in the graph here that there are different windows available for remote sensing and for acquiring remote sensing data from the space. And then different wavelengths in electromagnetic spectrum has different interaction with the vegetation canopies, and they provide very different type of information. Like visible has its own advantage, near infrared and thermal region has its own advantages. Similarly, microwave region has totally different information about the forest. As far as the acquisition of the remote sensing data for the forest and the natural areas is concerned, we have a variety of Earth orbits which are used for the purpose. For example, sun-synchronous satellites. Most of the satellites today are from in the sun-synchronous orbits. Like we have our IIRS series of satellites, LIS-3 A-wave sensors. They are placed on in the sun-synchronous orbit platform. And then we have GNSS satellites. You know that GPS we use. So they are very specific constellations which are made for GNSS observation. And different countries have different type of GNSS constellation, including India has developed the IRNSS system for better accuracy and precision. And then we have geostationary platform, that for meteorological observation as well as for the very dynamic phenomena like forest fires. If you have to monitor on a rapid basis, you need almost continuous observation. And in such cases, geostationary satellites are also useful. And in recent years, what is happening that we have now tendency of going towards the constellation. We have small satellites and they move in a large number, and then they are able to provide information of any part of the globe within a very shortest period of time. And though their lifespan is very short, but they can be they can be replaced. And such example of such is the planet data, which gives you 3-meter resolution satellite data. As far as ISRO's program is concerned, remote sensing and Earth observation program. So we have different centers and they have different functions. We have some of the centers like Space Application Center, they prepare the sensor system, and then we have places like IIRS at Bangalore. They integrate the different part of these satellites, and then we have SDSC spaceport, from where we launch our satellites, and then we have different tracking station, ISRO, MST. They track the synchronous and geostationary satellites, and then we have as a tracking station across the world, also in Antarctica and Svalbard. And then NRSC acquire the data from different Indian satellites as well as from the foreign satellite. They process the data and release for user, and then we have different application development done at NRSC and other centers. And IIRS mainly plays a role of dissemination of information and knowledge and education about the remote sensing and geoinformatics. The advantage of electromagnetic spectrum is for use in remote sensing is that, as I earlier mentioned, that visible region gives us information in a different way, and then we have thermal region. It gives about different information. Similarly, microwave region has a different kind of interaction with the micro forest canopy. So we actually intend to use the information from different wavelength region for effective decision making. That is why nowadays we have a lot of new satellites, new instruments are coming, which are covering different wavelength range for different ecosystem studies. So spectral signature is one which is very important. One has to understand it thoroughly. It is mainly, I am showing it here for optical region, how the different plants behave, and what are the different electromagnetic spectrum, part of electromagnetic spectrum, and what are the factors which influence the spectral reflectance are indicated here. And the visible region, primarily they are controlled by the pigments. NIR region, mainly the cell anatomy and the tree architecture, canopy architecture, and water content. And you have shortwave infrared region, where along with water, many other biochemical constituents are there, which play important role in determining the spectral signature of the plant. So one has to have this kind of knowledge so that he can actually interpret not only different type of species, differentiate different type of species, but also he can get a lot of insight about the health of the plants and how the phenology of the plant is changing across the seasons. All such kind of information, if you have to understand, you have to know the spectral signature. Then GNSS and ICT application, particularly global positioning system, you are already using in your mobile. You are accessing the satellites from different constellations, GPS constellations, and then you have DGPS also. You are using differential positioning system for precise measurement up to millimeter level measurements, and you are using. And then nowadays, in different forest logging operations, they are using basically GNSS with RF technology, and they are able to guide different machines and tools for forestry operations. Similarly, if you have to navigate under the forest canopy, you actually can use inertial navigation system plus GPS, and so that under the canopy you have actually a problem in accessing the satellite signal in dense canopy. So this type of integration of technology can provide you the navigation inside the under the canopy also. And then there are other applications like geofencing, and there are other applications which are used for during the emergency times, such as the forest fire, where there is a possibility of using multiple different observation system and facilities for tackling the forest fire. And so GNSS, ICT, remote sensing all together, they can be integrated nowadays. Now coming to some of the applications which are done in forestry. First thing is that in any part of geographic area, you need to actually understand what is the different type of natural variation in terms of biome, in terms of vegetation types, how much is their density, and how much are the communities, and how many are the species. So these are the common questions which everybody want to know, and how much is the area coverage. So these are basically the primary application using remote sensing which is done. And it is done at different scales. If you do it biome, then coarser scale. If you do it vegetation type, then relatively finer scale, at which our forest management practices are done. And then even finer scale, where we have community, species level mapping, etc., with very high resolution remote sensing data are carried out. Next level of information which is required, slightly advanced, is that forest density information at regular period of time, like Forest Survey of India does it every 2 years. Forest density monitoring helps us in assessing the how much is the degradation and whether there is an improvement in forests over time. Similarly, forest phenology is another very important parameter on which we want to know, because phenology is a very useful indicator of change in climate. So phenological matrices are used to derive from time series satellite data, and you can see that we are able to derive using modest data for entire India. How is the length of the season, the start of the season, end of the season. So these are all the important parameters which can be derived from remote sensing data. And over time, if you monitor this phenology using these satellite data, so you will be able to know how plants are responding to this change in climatic pattern. And similarly, the deriving the canopy level traits, physiological traits, morphological traits, such as the leaf area index, chlorophyll, nitrogen, and other biochemical constituents, is done using particularly hyperspectral remote sensing, is very useful for quantitative assessment of these parameters. As far as the forest, we are losing a lot of forest, and still deforestation rates are very high, particularly in the tropical forest. And as far as India is concerned, we have been regularly monitoring our forest, and forest change studies are being carried out using multi-temporal data and time series data. Historical forest cover change assessment has also been carried out with toposheet and satellite observations. And similarly, global forest change monitoring is now also routinely done using Lancet satellites data, and wherein you actually can annual basis you get the forest loss information from the Global Forest Watch. Similarly, outside forest, we are also doing detailed monitoring of the land use changes, and already in natural resource census program of the and from the forest from the National Remote Sensing Center, we have a detailed land use land cover monitoring program at every 5-year interval, and we have been monitoring the land use land cover changes also, apart from the forest cover changes which are being monitored by Forest Survey of India. And so and apart from that, whatever plantation activities like afforestation, reforestation activities, which is currently going on, is being done by the different forest department in different states, is been also monitored with very high resolution data under the Green Watch program of Forest Survey of India. So as far as the monitoring changes in special extent is there, India is at a very good position, because we have a very legacy of using satellite remote sensing data by different institutions, both from ISRO as from nodal agency like FSI, and we have developed enough technical capacity to generate the time series change information for forest cover as well as for land use change. Another type of studies which are useful is particularly for a biodiversity country like India. We have different biogeographical zone, and where we have different variety of species, variety of habitat types exist here. So one of the thing is that how to do conservation planning, particularly with respect to protected areas, and how rational to define the rational protected areas for conserving plant biodiversity, animal biodiversity, etc. We basically need prioritization approach, and in one of the first such a kind of assessment in Southeast Asia, we have actually prepared the biodiversity prioritization maps here. We have done the vegetation mapping, detailed vegetation mapping using IIRS series of satellite data, and then also assess the fragmentation status of different forest types, and what is the level of human disturbance they are facing, and finally what is the concentration of plant resources across India in terms of unique species, rare, endangered, threatened species, as well as the unique habitat types. So this type of information has been generated at 1:50,000 scale in a biodiversity project carried out last 1 decade, almost 1 decade time it took. And so this type of biodiversity studies has been done here. The main science part was that here satellite data was used, here field inventory was used, as well as landscape ecological principles were used to generate various type of outputs. Another aspect of managing biodiversity is that apart from the native species in India, because of the increasing globalization, we have now a lot of exotic species also here, and a lot of such species which have very invasive characters, and they are spreading in different part of the country. And today, with the help of certain ecological niche modeling tools, researchers are trying to predict the area suitable or likely to be invaded by invasive species. And so there are a lot of studies today available, and a lot of published literature from India also it is available on different species. Similarly, at the same time, actual detection of these invasive species and their spread is also very important, and some success have been achieved even with multispectral data also. There are many species such as the species are there which has where their spread and occurrence has been mapped using satellite remote sensing data. But enough scope exists here for use of imaging spectroscopy and hyperspectral remote sensing in detection and monitoring of the invasive species. Then further, there is a new novel research is being done to actually map the species and as well as with the very high resolution hyperspectral remote sensing data such as the IIRS NG data, which is a airborne hyperspectral satellite data from NASA. And in India also recently several studies has been done by the researcher from ISRO in partnership with other universities, and they have been able to demonstrate the potential of very high resolution hyperspectral remote sensing data in species mapping, particularly native and invasive species, and other biochemical characterization of different uh, uh, vegetative formations. And then because in biodiversity another important is bioinformatics, and bioinformatics is particularly useful because when you do project on biodiversity, you collect a lot of data and you generate a lot of outputs which need to be disseminated to the user department, those who are managing the biodiversity. So for that, some portal development is also being taken up, like Biodiversity Information System and Indian Bioresource Information Network. So these are the portal which actually contain a lot of useful information, both spatial and non-spatial information on different aspects of biodiversity, plants and animal biodiversity. And the next theme of application is the apart from biodiversity in the forest area, it's also important to assess the carbon stock biomass of the forest in view of their role of the forest in sequestrating the atmospheric carbon. And now COP 27 is going on in Egypt, and it is very important to show for every country to show how much the role the forest of their countries are playing in sequestrating the atmospheric carbon. And for that, the biomass assessment, particularly the above ground biomass assessment using remote sensing techniques, is one of the very important applications. And ISRO has taken initiative in this, and we have generated the country level carbon map, as well as we have we have shown that where we have difficulty in assessing the higher amount of forest biomass and carbon stocks, like in Western Ghats, Northeast, and Western Himalaya, and where we are even able to achieve good accuracy with optical remote sensing data. Then the next level of satellite sensors which are used to address the forest carbon assessment challenges is the use of microwave and lidar remote sensing. And nowadays, because a lot of new sensor in this last 5-6 years, particularly both in for the SAR as well as the lidar, a lot of new generation sensor have come which have a very high potential in generating both structure and composition biomass information of the forest areas. And among such is NISAR mission, which is going to be launched in 2024 by ISRO, is actually one of the mission which will be used extensively for the biomass studies across globe. And then the LiDAR missions, which are currently JEDI and ISET-2, they are offering free LiDAR data, and this data is being extensively used for to improve the biomass model by the researchers. And then there is a biomass mission which is also coming from NASA at P band, and ESA from P band frequency, and which will have an even higher potential to assess the highly dense biomass areas. Then we have another application which is possible from satellite is the tracking of wildlife, particularly birds and mammals in the open areas. So this is one study which is done by Wildlife Institute of India. They use the satellite collar and satellite tag, and they put the satellite tag over a bird called Amur falcon, which travels from Mongolia, part of China, Mongolia or China, to South Africa via Indian state Arunachal Pradesh. So they tag this and then they track the movement of 3 individuals, and you can see in the map that a very interesting track route has been generated using satellite telemetry techniques, and these kind of techniques are very useful in understanding the ecology, wildlife ecology, their dispersal routes, their feeding, resource utilization, and any threat to these particular birds because of which lead to their mortality can also be understood from this kind of. Now extensively this type of satellite, as the satellite tags are becoming smaller and miniaturized, and there is a possibility to put these satellite tag even in small birds. Like recently IIRS and WI put a tag of 5 gram on a bird called rainbow cuckoo bird, and which also travels from South Africa to India as a harbinger of monsoon, we call it. So there are possibilities since in last 10-15 years a lot of development has taken place in satellite telemetry, and a lot of studies are being done actually using satellite telemetry today, both for the understanding the ecology of the wildlife and also for the management of the problematic species. So and then a lot of GIS is being used nowadays in particularly national level assessment, and WI from Wildlife Institute of India, they have been using GIS techniques particularly for, and statistical techniques particularly for the tiger census, and in this they are using both the tiger and its prey data as well as the human disturbance data and the camera traps which as they have installed across the different tiger conservation areas, and then they have been able to generate the especially explicit tiger density estimates. And so this type of integration of data from variety of sources is being done using geoinformatics techniques, and then we are able to have a spatial distribution maps of tigers across the country and its prey base. Also for different prey species, also such maps are being generated, and so this is very effective. This technology is very effective in particularly bringing a lot of conservation success in particularly for the wild carnivore and their prey species. In India also tiger is one of such example. And another application area is the forests are also source of livelihood, and we have a range of non-timber forest produce which minor forest produce which are collected by mainly by the tribal population which are in different part of the country. And so these products also, it is also very important to know their spatial extent, also know the yield of these products from the forest areas, how much they are being generated in different part of the year, or how much is the pressure on these NTFP. So there could be a number of such studies are required, particularly for NTFP and proper assessment. And there are also already example that NTFP species such as bamboo and certain grasslands, chilgoja, ephedra, solas, saffron, hippopi rhamnoides, it's found in Ladakh and other part of the Uttarakhand and Himachal. So such type of useful species has been mapped using remote sensing data, and they are very useful products for actually for the industries which are enterprises which are dependent on these raw products. And in this actually range of optical data at different resolution, multispectral data, and all such kind of spectral inform based remote sensing data are used for their mapping and characterization. Another very interesting area and very unexplored area is the ecosystem services. You know that forests are source of not only different types of medicines, food, resources, fodder resources, etc., but there are also ecosystem services such as carbon sequestration, such as the water filtration and improving soil fertility. These are listed here in this graph. And today, apart from the economic assessment of these ecosystem services, a lot of emphasis is being given on the spatial assessment of these ecosystem services, whether it is food, water provision, whether it is climate and gas regulation, erosion regulation, soil formation, nutrient cycling, primary production, etc., pollination. And if you go through the internet, you will find a lot of very interesting remote sensing based studies are being done using field as well as the remote sensing data, and specially explicit maps are being prepared for individual ecosystem services. And you can see here that a lot of EU-based products, LULC, NDVA, LAI, Elevation, LSD, SSD, and many other such products, they are used in a variety of different ways to assess the provisioning, regulating, and cultural services which are provided by the forest. So then there is another area which, particularly for country like India, is very important, that we are a tropical and subtropical climate system, and we have also very large coverage of coniferous species. So we are very fire prone area here, and every summer season we have a lot of fire incidences, and as population is growing, fire incidences are also increasing. Human disturbance, biodiversity disturbance is increasing forest area. But now we have a very effective system, in fact, because from using two satellite remote satellite system, MODIS and VIIRS, which have thermal sensors, we are able to actually detect the active fire which is happening at any point of time when the satellite passes over any area, and we detect this active fire, and then we give this information from FSI to the forest department, and then they take this information for controlling the forest fire. So this has been a very successful earth observation application as far as in country like India is concerned. And similarly, we have other applications like burnt area assessment, and also for pre-warning of the conditions suitable for the forest fire to occur, and also the forest fire recovery of vegetation which happens. So there are different type of application also possible in this domain. And this picture shows the extent of large fires. In certain years, we are having episodic fires, particularly in Himalayan state, we have witnessed it. And because now climate change is one of the things which is some of the year, this year also you might have heard that in Europe there are a lot of forest fire incidences has happened due to the increased dryness in the atmosphere, as well as the dryness of the forest litter, and the large fire has happened across Europe, and even in India also. In certain years when droughts are there, large forest fires are happening, and a lot of areas getting burned, a lot of emission of carbon is going into the atmosphere. So apart from that, there are certain other geoinformatic applications are like preparing apps for forest fire reporting by the forest guards or the forest officials are being done using this geospatial web-based technology. And then one of the major problem for ours, country like ours, is that we have large population, and we have to protect our forest from illegal activities. And for that purpose, we need to actually identify the boundaries of the forest, and precisely, and in terms of, we should have a very precise geospatial database where our forest boundaries, revenue boundaries should be well defined, so that the enforcement of the laws, particularly like Forest Conservation Act and Wildlife Protection Act, can only be effectively implemented when you have very good database and you have the information about the forest boundaries. So currently this work is also going on across India, and not from our side, but it is from different state governments are taking up this activity in consultation with Forest Survey of India, and very high resolution satellite remote sensing data, and as well as global DGPS systems are used to carry out this type of task. And very high resolution satellite data is particularly useful for this type of activity, other than the GPS or DGPS observations. So and then finally, not only forestry within the forest cover management not only required about the information about the forest and its different attributes of the forest, but also it required information about the geology, it required information about the soil resources, soil information. It also required information about the water, because water has become a very important component. A lot of rivers in India, they originate from the forest areas only. So and administrative information. So this type of information, even our forest applications, when they are integrated with such other themes, so in portal like Bhuvan, which has been developed by ISRO, and if you visit this portal, so you can actually analyze the forest information with other thematic information and really understand the forest, what kind of changes are taking place in the forest system, what are their characteristics, as well as how they actually important they are from the point of view of hydrology and soil, conserving soil and other aspects. So for that, you may visit this Bhuvan portal, and there are a lot of databases not only shared by the ISRO but also from the other ministries which are concerned ministries like MEFCC. They have shared a lot of database in Bhuvan portal, and you can see it and you can utilize this information which is available there for your research and for other academic purposes. So with this, I have come to the end of my talk, and